Good morning. Welcome to the Long Live Alternative Parties podcast. Free Press Media Press Inc., an alternative parties books publisher, sponsors this podcast. I'm Andrew Bouchard. Welcome to the Long Live Alternative Parties podcast. Today, friends, we have another exciting guest like we always have on this podcast. We have an individual with the same name as mine. He goes by Andy, and he's with the Coalition of Third-Party Organizers. So he's going to talk to us about the exciting things he's doing today. So welcome to the podcast, Andy.
Hey, Andrew. I'm glad to have you.
Yes, we're glad to have you as well. So let us get started by you kindly giving us an introduction to yourself, a brief biographical sketch.
Sure. Well, I've always been a Democrat, but always a champion of third parties as well. I was a neighborhood storefront lawyer and represented the Citizens Party in the ballot access issue in Minnesota back a long time ago, and got elected to the legislature and tried proportional representation as a bill, but couldn't get even a hearing on that. Challenged Minnesota's anti-fusion law, but you know what fusion is, where you can be on the ballot under two different parties or whatever, and people get to
like
choose which party they want to vote for. Yeah, like New York. And that went all the way to the United States Supreme Court. I was the Twin City, Minneapolis, St. Paul, Twin City area new party candidate, as well as the Democrat in an election in the 90s, and once the United States Supreme Court 6-3 decision, they said that the state's interest in an orderly ballot outweighed the First Amendment right of association, constitutional right. So did that. Then, ran for Attorney General of Minnesota as a Green Party candidate, and had too many of my friends who were Democrats, members in the legislature, say, we can't vote for you because that'll make the Republican the winner. And I organized the third-party coalition group here in the Twin Cities around the state of Minnesota. Actually, we were statewide. That we tried to figure out a way that instead of us all minor party candidates, getting competing with each other and so on, that we'd run a libertarian for one office, like Attorney General, and a Green Party for another office, and then have an independent and have. We had 4 or 5 major parties meeting like that, but the independents and the libertarians came to cross swords and backed out of the deal. That one didn't really take off. But mostly I've now been working on ranked choice voting as the way to, and we just passed it here in Minnesota. This legislative session just concluded to give, that ranked choice voting can work in a way to help third parties too. So I've always been a big fan and proponent of getting more people, and independents are becoming the largest number of voters out there, and somebody needs to tap that group, and I'm hoping that Andrew Yang's Forward Party maybe will take off, but I'm not seeing a lot of action here in Minnesota, at least on that front. But that's all the history I got to give you.
Wow. It sounds like your history is a direct line to the work you do now to advance reforms in the two-party system.
Yeah, right. No, it's that's for sure. Yeah, I'm just a volunteer these days. I'm not part of any official organization working on it, but I'm volunteering here and there and stuff.
Sounds good. So how did the organization Coalition of Third-Party Organizers start?
Well, I was recruited by the Green Party to be their candidate for Attorney General. And I looked around and I met the Libertarian Party chair in Minnesota, a guy named Chris Dock, and I asked him a couple questions. Like one was that, in the Libertarian platform it says do no harm to others. And I said, but what happens when you got polluters upstream or other ways? I mean, shouldn't that be the same thing as do no harm to others? Don't we need some government regulation?
Sure.
And he agreed that, libertarians aren't against every government regulation. And so we formed an alliance, and then we started meeting at a bar at there's a bar on University Avenue in St. Paul called the Turf Club. And we started meeting there and just talking, and pretty soon we had, a dozen people from around the state coming from 4 or 5 of the minor parties, and we decided to form the Coalition of Third-Party Organizers.
Sounds good. The whole point.
Yeah, I wish I could tell you that we've been more fruitful. I really do think that the I don't know if you know Jackie Solit in Arizona doing the independent party movement, Andrew Yang stuff. You know that name?
No, that doesn't ring a bell.
Yeah, okay. Well, look up Jackie Salit, S-A-L-I-T at Arizona State University, and what she's doing but she's got a new book out there right now talking about the independent voter. I think that's the title of the book, The Independent Voter. And, you know, somebody needs to tap that independent voter because they just, they're ready to have somebody come forward that has, the best of the basic conservative values and also believe that we need to elect the whole Andrew Yang Forward Party. In my mind, it's not about taking a stand on a single issue. It's about election reform and how we elect. And so getting back to a majority vote system like ranked choice voting is and doing things like that are kind of where I've got my hope these days.
All right. So our audience, because we focus on alternative parties and election reform here, are against the two-party system. They want to change that. So you'll have a captive audience here that people will love to hear what you have to say about that. In case there's somebody listening that is unsure about what's wrong with the two-party system, can you briefly describe what's wrong with the two-party system?
Well, sure. I mean, first of all, it is the spoiler wasted vote problem, so that when the easiest to remember example was when Ralph Nader was running, and Al Gore, Al Gore and George Bush, and Nader took enough votes away from in Florida that's what got Bush elected president. Said so. It's people don't vote for third parties because they feel like it's a wasted vote or it's a spoiler vote or so. Yeah, you have that problem with the two-party system. You also got the problem with two-party systems that they're both mostly in the pocketbooks of the vested wealthy interests in the country, and the Democrats have to figure out a way to get back the rural voter and the labor vote, and I think that it's the Democrats' problem is being too tied in with I don't ever think of myself as an elitist type person, and I was a Democrat all my life because they were on the side of the working guy and the little guy. And now I think that the Democrats have, with Clinton's doing that stuff that he did, and it's just, it's a two-party duopoly that controls all the levers, and we got to break that up.
So how do we break that up? How do we fix the problems of the two-party system?
Well, the first thing, I don't know how old you are, but I've got this 25-year-old and a 23-year-old two sons that I check with them about politics all the time, and no one's really following politics. We need to find somebody who knows how to do the algorithms that can crack into the who's out there that could be a voter and what information they need to get to start participating. It's it does come to who shows up wins and who comes out to vote gets the cookies, and so we got to increase the awareness of the Zoomer generation, and they're all, when you ask them individually, they're all about, that the climate change is a big problem and that, we got to fight against racism and do all those kinds of things. But how does that translate to elections is the trick.
Sure. So which reform or what reform do you think would be the most impactful in changing the two-party system for the good?
Well, if you're being a realist about it, there's a few of them that don't have a chance that I think would be the best. But I like the ranked choice voting idea that Maine is doing now and Alaska is doing and Minnesota is going to start doing, and it lets you make sure that we get the person that's got the majority of the folks behind it, and so then people can say, yeah, okay, I'll go out and vote for a Green Party candidate as my first choice, and they could develop power that way and show that, hey, a lot of the current crowd of Democrats would prefer that the be a more idealistic, or some, idealism has its place, but also being pragmatic and stuff does too. But get the candidates on the ballot that, you get excited about. And even if you have to have them drop off and it ends up being somewhere else, you still got your backup vote for the next best choice you got. So that's the one that I'm counting on most here in Minnesota, that we can, start to, develop a real, a stronger third party alignment amongst the voters. But on the other hand, the legislature that just concluded here in Minnesota that did put ranked choice voting onto a statewide, it's got 2 years before it gets implemented, but it's going to come. They also increased the threshold to 8% for qualify as a major party, and that was up from 5%. So they're making it tougher for third parties to qualify, to have, be in the debates and get the public financing and things like that. So it's not just that the Democrats are fans of third parties.
So you're saying that Minnesota is going to implement this?
Yeah, what we did was pass a law that said that starting in the very next election at local level, municipal, county elections, school board elections, that will have ranked choice voting starting in next year's elections, 2024. But statewide is going to have a task force of a whole lot of election officials and party, different people and so on. But then it automatically goes statewide for the 2027 election, unless, of course, it gets repealed by the legislature the next year or two, but that would happen if the Republicans took back control of the Minnesota legislature or the governorship. But I think that we're going to see ranked choice voting in Minnesota as the 2027 election and then for president in 2028 we'll be voting ranked choice voting. What do you think about ranked choice voting?
I think it's a good idea. A lot of our listeners support that. We've interviewed ranked choice voting organizations, so it is a step in the right direction. It is one reform that can make a difference. It seems like people have a lot of support for it. From what people talk about on this podcast, it sounds like it's something that's feasible, that can be done. Organizations have research showing that it works, that it doesn't confuse voters necessarily. So it sounds like something.
Yeah, that's good. What's your favorite way of trying to build a third-party movement? What are your, from talking to so many people, what would you say would be the best things we could do?
That's a tough question. I want to honor all the ideas that people say on this podcast. So I don't want to necessarily say one is better. I think some get to the heart of the two-party system more than others do. So
right.
Because we want to tear the system up. So something like proportional representation would tear the system up.
Well, I put that bill in now. It was a while back when I was in the state legislature, but I put the bill in that if you get 10% of the vote in your district, you get one vote at the legislature. If you get 60% of the vote in your district, you get 6 votes. And as long as you got at least 10%, you're going to have a voice up at the Capitol. And but like I told you, that the Democrats in control would have nothing to do with it.
Okay, so the Democrats. So since you were a former Democrat, you're in the minority for people wanting to change that in the system.
Yeah. No, I mean, I was always, I've always been, what would I say best? Somebody that, wants to shake things up and change things and think that this country could be a whole lot better than it is and how we do things. And so I got to the legislature running in a urban district that I told the voters, you elect me, I'm being the hardest working and most progressive legislator up there. And so I put the bill in right away to start proportional representation. But like I told you, that didn't get any legs because the Democrats wouldn't, toss out as a threat.
That's good. We have had other Democrats on the podcast talk about how they do support reform. Some of them, unfortunately, it's not enough of the party. So it is good. We find it refreshing that there are some Democrats, however few, that do want to change the system like we do. So that's awesome.
Well, let me tell you how we got ranked choice voting done here in Minnesota. I mean, it's a longer story, but last summer we targeted, we already had the Minnesota House under Democratic control, but the Republicans controlled the Minnesota Senate. And we targeted a dozen incumbent male pro-life Republican senators and ran pro-choice female challengers that agreed that they would vote for ranked choice voting. And we had a strong cadre of volunteers and went out and we won 9 of those 12 races and changed the Minnesota Senate to be in for ranked choice voting. And we also raised enough money so that we go to the Democratic caucuses and they knew that we had purse strings to help them get their elections victories. And so they couldn't say no to us once we won those races and had control of both bodies. And we got the governor early on to commit that he'd sign the bill if it got to his desk. And so we really, it took a lot of volunteers doing a lot of door knocking for a lot of candidates before we were able to get to the point we got ranked choice voting in Minnesota.
Okay, that sounds good. So it sounds like you did a good job and you made it happen. That's what we like to see.
Right. Now, the Coalition of Third-Party Organizers in Minnesota has been pretty meek and inactive now for a while. We had the legalized parties, and now that the legislature legalized recreational marijuana, those third parties are gonna, no longer have their single issue that why they're running people. So it's the Independence Party in Minnesota has been mostly non-existent. The one candidate we had to be a forward party candidate dropped out. So I don't see any strong third party movement in Minnesota happening right now, but I'm hoping that, I'm now 73 years old, so I'm not the activist and the organizer I once was, but it'd be nice if some of the 20-somethings and 30-somethings would try to get together and say, now's the time to have the third party again, be a strong third party. And I don't know if you're following Andrew Yang's Forward Party at all, but I haven't heard much from them lately. Yeah. Well, how are they doing in Texas? Anything going on with the Forward Party in Texas?
I do follow them. Some I followed the Sam Party. I followed them for a while. Then they merged with the Forward Party.
Yeah.
So I'm still on the list. Sometimes I get stuff from them.
There's still a pirate party out in California doing things?
They do have pirate parties. I've contacted them for our program. It's hard to reach a lot of them, but if anyone out there is involved, you want to come on, we'd love to have you.
Yeah, well, I don't know any names on the pirate party, but a coalition of all the parties we're talking about would come together on the single issue of electoral reform and not worry about whether you're pro-choice or pro-life or, pro-gun or anti-gun, or not worry about, getting stuck on a single issue, but just concentrate a coalition around electoral reform and get out to the Zoomer generation with that. And that would be the recipe that somebody wanted to, I don't know who we got that is of enough national prominence that they could try to pull something like that together, but that would be really good.
Yes. That it is reassuring and inspiring to see people of different perspectives get together and work for a common cause. After all, Ralph Nader and Pat Buchanan, they engaged in coalition building. So we can also do it in other ways, and we have been doing it in other ways. It is very inspiring.
I don't know how many listeners you got, but the name Jesse Ventura. He was the independent.
Of course.
He likes to be on podcasts. He has his own podcast even. You might want to hook up with Jesse. He'd be a great guest for you.
Yes, he would. Now, that's a very intimidating guess because of his accomplishments and of his achievements. So I don't know
Yeah,
how
but
to
he likes
reach him.
talking about it. He likes talking about it. If you can get a hold of him, you should. He'd be a good one to have. I
Okay.
haven't talked to Jesse for a couple of years, but I've always was a big fan of Jesse Ventura's. He just had a little bit too thin a skin for the media. That was his problem.
Okay, so you've met him before.
Oh, I know Jesse. Sure, we're friends. The last time I saw him was oh, geez, that's now like 4 years ago. I think last time I saw him, but he's got a podcast out there. You can find him.
That's right. Because after I heard after the Ukrainian war, he lost his job with RT because that was owned by Russia, and then he went to Substack, right?
I think that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So that's something to consider. I appreciate your encouragement on that. I'm liking this idea, so I need to look into that. So can you tell our audience how they can support you in your efforts?
Well, yeah. I mean, it's not me individually. I would just say to all the listeners out there that find out in your local area which is the most viable third party around, and talk to them, get part of that group to include them to build the coalition amongst the other third parties on the single issue of electoral reform. I guess that's the recipe I would offer.
All right. We can do that.
Well,
Andy,
listen, thanks. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Thanks
Yeah,
for having me. Keep me posted. How do I keep track of what you're doing?
Okay. What I plan to do after the podcast, I upload it. I plan to send you links to it, and then we have a Facebook page, and we
Great.
have other social media accounts that we run that talk about this podcast and the other stuff we're doing like that.
Well, that sounds great. I'd love to get that stuff and keep following what you guys are doing and encourage everybody out there to not give this up. I think we're on the rise. I really do think that the number of independents, or indies as they call themselves out there, the independent voter is the next thing that's happening. So we got to work on that.
Yes, I trust you are right. So thanks for coming on the podcast. We appreciate hearing your views.
Talk to you later, Andrew.
All right. Take care.
Bye-bye.